So what we'd like to do is start with some Barbara here, who has helped us in the organization process and who also will be a yogi during the retreat, as I will be. Would like to start by sharing a few questions that meditators have previously asked and some of the questions to them, so that maybe questions that you might have might come up here and they'll be answered, or questions which you might have which you don't yet know about might be answered. So we'll start with that. Barbara?
Yeah.
If you could put the microphone on, do that.
Just click on. Like that? Yeah. Okay. Before I read one of the questions that were asked, that is a very important question, because yogis seem to think of it later on as they're practicing. And since there will be no chance really to ask unless you ask Sayadaw, I thought I'd attend to that question first. But before I answer the question that I'm going to read, I want to mention something that comes up for everyone. And that is, yogis have, in a very short time after practicing, while practicing, they develop what's called sensitive mind. Somehow, we in the West here seem to think that sensitive mind is very special and precious. Sayadaw himself has mentioned that when yogis develop sensitive mind, he ignores that part of their mind. And so, to put it where maybe one can understand it best, sensitive mind virtually means lots of self-pity or lots of blaming. And somehow it goes unrecognized by us in the West. We find it a precious kind of mind because it's soft and gentle, we think. Softness and gentleness is usually all about us. And so just to mention it first, so that everyone here gets the opportunity to see it when it comes and dispense with it as soon as possible. It's not a wholesome mental state. We seem to think it is. It is not. It feels childlike. It feels soft. It feels all the things that people in the West are sometimes craving for. It's not wholesome. It's about self-pity or blaming others. So please identify that as soon as you can, for your own sakes. The question that's been asked is how to prepare to report on your base interview. Do you report on the most recent sitting in the base interview, where on occurrences that were noted well at the time and were very predominant when experienced? Or do you report on your last sitting, your most recent one? So is that clear, the question? So you say you haven't seen a Sayadaw for 2 days, and so there's an awful lot of sittings during those 2 days. Most yogis believe that they should report on their last one because they're feeling that at the time of interview. You're feeling like your most recent sitting. However, that's not so. All your sittings are most recent. So don't worry if you are not reporting for the sittings actually any time that day and you go to see Sayadaw that day, because you're not going to see Sayadaw every day as far as I know. Don't be concerned that the sitting that was most clear and most predominant was a day and a half ago or 2 days ago. That's still recent enough. Right? Is that clear? And I know Andrew and Bill already wrote in the instructions that you don't have to worry that you're deceiving Sayadaw. You had a clear sitting 2 days ago, and now your mind is completely fogged and confused. Don't be concerned about that. Just report on whatever clarity you got from whatever sitting, and he'll take care of the rest. So you're not deceiving him whatsoever. He knows what you can't do, What he's dying to find out is what you can do. Okay. The other thing mentioned, a yogi wrote, how to remember what to talk about without having to carry it in memory around in your head all day. Absolutely. You must have a little notebook if you want to jot something down and then leave it. So that would mean you would carry that notebook around to every sitting place and to all your walking places. Or if you wanted, you could leave it here, and then before you started sitting, you could write down the walking if you wanted. Whichever the case, doesn't matter. Take that little book along so you can finish with whatever happened. Is that clear? So that you don't have to walk around thinking for 2 days about that one sitting or one walking. All right. Sleepiness and drowsiness, a really important subject. It causes a lot of grief in us, and sometimes we don't mention it to Sayadaw, and yet we feel like we're deceiving. Sleepiness and drowsiness must be worked with. It can be a yogi that's practiced for 20 years and a yogi that just begins this morning. Same. In that level, everybody is going to experience sleepiness and drowsiness. It's not something you wait for it to end, because virtually it can never end. We can spend 6 weeks here, maybe have 1 or 2 good sittings, and the rest of the time be sleepy and drowsy. It's really important to note it. If you find you sleepy and drowsiness arising, go away from the rising and falling then, and really focus on the most predominant sensations. I like to open my eyes and keep them downcast sometimes. Sometimes don't need to do that. Just working with the physical sensations. Everybody has to find what works for them. But you must work with it. It's not something to wait for it to be finished with, because virtually, honestly, it's never going to be finished with. It will just come again and again. The more we support it, the more it will arise. So just want to make that clear. Each yogi usually thinks for themselves, oh, I am so sleepy. Everybody else is sitting fine, but I am so sleepy. And it's already 2 weeks into the retreat. Everybody works with sleepiness and drowsiness. And one doesn't have to be sleepy or drowsy. One just has to sit quietly. You're not doing your usual daily activities where you're moving around all the time. And the mind shows itself to be dull. That's its natural, ordinary state, dull. So please try to work with that for your own sakes. Another mention that I've come across for years with yogis, all of us. Some of us love walking meditation. Some of us hate walking meditation. Doesn't matter. The ones that love it can change. Certainly the ones that hate it can change. I've seen yogis go from hating it to loving it more than anything. A yogi that hates walking meditation, I personally would suggest do the fast walking first then. Break it up to 3s. Fast for 20 minutes, meaning left, right, left, right, left, right. Then the next, lifting, placing for the next 20 minutes. And then the third, lifting, moving, placing. That really should take care of the problem in quite a short time. The other thing to mention that somehow doesn't get said here, people that have a lot of stomach problems need to do that walking meditation all the time. Fast for 20 minutes, medium, lifting and placing for 20 minutes, and the slow for 20 minutes. Of course, if you only have 45 minutes, the same, 15, 15, 15 minutes. So, because people with stomach problems need to generate that kind of motion in the body, and it's very, very helpful for them. For others, use it when you need it. Another mention. These are all my little notes over the years of myself and other yogis have had a hard time about. A lot of I have to's a yogi starts to see. I have to go walk. I have to sit. I have to do this and I have to do that. Really try to catch those have-tos in the mind. It can be very subtle. You might hear the word I have to, or for some of you, maybe you don't have quite the full announcement of the word I have to, but the feeling is there nonetheless. Really see if you can catch that. Sayadaw said last retreat that when a yogi reaches his sitting cushion, his or her sitting cushion, he should be generating a lot of joy or desire to sit. One doesn't feel joy, then desire, because one is going to go sit and look at mind and matter. Mind and matter is the cause of all our problems. Here we've got the opportunity to sit and look at this, and we're generating I have to. No way. There's no way on earth that an I have to mind can bring anything. It just sits through the entire sitting waiting for it to be over. So really try to catch that I have to as much as you can whenever you can. Don't judge that I have to. Everyone has them. Really change it. Change it in the moment. Generate softness or sweetness or joy or desire or excitement, whatever, that you're going to sit and look at mind and matter and free yourselves from this whole mass of suffering. All right. That's all my little notes on what to do. Few more mentions. Sayadaw has said in the past to put all politeness aside, to really mind your own business, so to speak. Mind your own affairs. Do not be concerned about other yogis whatsoever. Of course we don't slam a door in somebody's face when they're standing behind us if we know they're there. So in case they might be there, we don't do that anyway. Other than that, to really keep focus on this mind and matter. Wherever you're sitting right now, whatever matter is sitting there, to keep the mind focused on that and not to be concerned with other yogis whatsoever. Really to note your concern whenever it does arise. So all politeness aside, he said. During activities and during walking, some of you know, some of you don't, to keep your eyes downcast about, I think it's said to be about 5 or 6 feet in front of you. To absolutely not look up in a distance and not to look around. You're concerned again with this mind and matter that's sitting on the floor, not with what anybody else is doing whatsoever. And the mind is bound to start noticing if you're looking up or even looking off in a distance. Right, I think that's all the notes I have here. Are there any questions? Yes, please.
I would like you to clarify, if you would, about what is meant by sensitive mind. You said about self-pity and
right.
such. It's not clear to me.
Okay, all right. Sensitive mind is the mind that we get developed here quite shortly, that feels very childlike and open. It feels very gentle, sensitive to things that we're not usually sensitive to as adults. Open, childlike, soft. It feels caring. It's not necessarily caring at all. It can be masking we're caring about this at the expense of that. It's the mind that doesn't like a loud sound and gets mad at the yogi because they made it. It's the mind that doesn't like that Sayadaw didn't notice our sensitivity and talk to our sensitivity. It's just like virtually the little child who gets mad at its parents, no matter if its parents tell him something that's good for him. He doesn't care. If it doesn't sound perfectly satisfactory to the child starts to cry. It's a very similar mind to that. There's a lot of self-pity in that mind of you hurt me. That's the mind I'm talking about.
Is it also the mind that looks around and sees beauty?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. Yeah, because if we look around and see beauty, at that moment, Sayadaw calls that just a tiny defilement, very tiny. But he calls in the other defilements. So it's the onset of that. That if we're looking at a sunset, he calls it, it's just a tiny defilement. Won't hurt us very much, but what will hurt us is what the cause and effect that generates from that.
What would be the
Okay,
effect?
right, all right, we're looking,
What would be
right.
the other defilement?
Okay, we're looking at a sunset, and suddenly we start remembering something from the past, another sunset. And then we remember the person we were with or the person we weren't with, and we're either filled with remorse or we're filled with sensual delight about wanting to be with that person again and what happened in the past and how great I felt then. And that generates another unwholesome and another unwholesome and another unwholesome. So, yeah, just that little action was only a tiny defilement, but what it brings on can be gigantic, so that you spend 2 days lost in either sensual pleasure, thinking of what happened in the past, or filled with remorse about something that didn't happen in the past.
So what if you see a beautiful rhododendron, for example, and
Right,
it pleases
right.
you?
Note pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. You bring yourself right into the moment and realize that you've just seen something, either note seeing or note the pleasure involved. But indeed, note the pleasure. That's essential. And let that go, right? Right. To the degree we can note these unpleasant sensations when we sit here and not move, that's to the degree we're going to be able to note the pleasant when we see it. But to the degree that we don't note the unpleasant as we sit here, we're not going to catch the pleasant. Why? Because if we're sitting here and we can't note the unpleasant, it's because we're craving for pleasant. As long as we're craving for pleasant, we can't note pleasant. So every time you make a note that really comes to this, mind and matter, mind and matter, mind and matter, you've then generated the ability for yourself to note what's going to come next. They're so tied into each other, it's unbelievable. Every single moment has to do with the succeeding moments. And it took me so long to understand that. I hope nobody has to take that long. There was so much unpleasantness going on in this physical body. So I would sit for hours. I could sit 3 hours, no problem, and just think of all the pleasant things I could remember in life. Just so I could sit quietly, not move, and not look at this physical body. And as a result, nothing was ever gained. So please, don't waste your time like I did. Are there any other questions about reporting? Yes, please.
The reporting on walking as opposed to sitting.
As opposed to sitting. Okay, there's many things to be said. Number one, a yogi should not sit unless they've walked first. That's number one. Sayadaw mentioned many years ago, it's like the battery in a car. If you don't charge that battery, you have no power in sitting here. And it doesn't matter what you believe. I mean, you'll do it the hard way then. Better, much more important is walk first. That's the first thing to mention about walking. Walking is unbelievably powerful when it comes to walking, sitting, walking, sitting, walking, sitting. We don't always know that because so many thoughts get generated when we walk. We think we're just like home, just taking a walk. Feels like, what are we doing this for? It's not so. The second thing to mention about that is as soon as you find yourself lost in thought, stop. Stop and start all over again like you're making the first step you've ever taken. Don't worry about what happened before. Don't worry about 14 hours so far of not paying attention and walking. Start right there as soon as you can realize it. You're only interested now, or you should only be interested in the mind that can stop and start again. Don't worry about what you didn't do. It simply doesn't matter. So, in walking, if you find yourself lost in thought, stop. Start paying attention to the lifting or left, right, whichever one you happen to be doing. If you find yourself lost in thought again, another moment later, stop. Note standing, standing, standing. Intention to walk. You're slowing everything up now by this process. Begin all over again. Come back to doing that over and over and over, and I can promise you that thoughts will pass away. That doesn't mean, of course, they'll arise again, but the intense thoughts where you're lost in thought and it just won't stop. It's going on and on and on. Stop. Note standing. Note intention. Begin to walk. Is that clear? Reporting it. In the beginning, all of you can report your one walking meditation. Sayadaw wants to hear either the lifting and placing and your experiences in that, and I'll describe that in a moment, or lifting, moving, and placing. After the first time, can't really tell you, maybe the second time, drop. Okay, after the first time reporting, the next time you come to report, if you have different experiences to report in the walking, then report that. But if you don't have different than you did 2 days ago or 3 days ago, you're just going to repeat the same experiences again, then drop it. Don't report that walking. And then only report a walking meditation when it's worthwhile of reporting, when you've experienced real clear phenomena in the lifting and the placing, or the lifting, moving, and placing. Yes?
Just like to amend that a little.
Okay.
In my experience with Sayadaw has actually asked me to continue to report the lifting, moving, and placing,
Okay.
or the walking
Okay.
meditation. And if he wants you to stop, then he will not ask you about it, and he'll just, at the end of your report on the sitting, then he will, gong the next person and won't ask you about it. But it's definitely a good idea to prepare a report on the walking meditation, so you can clarify for yourself what your experience was, and in the event that Sayadaw does ask you, and he's been known to ask you when you don't prepare. There are many stories like that. So it's a good idea to have that ready, and then if he doesn't ask you, no problem, no insult. It doesn't mean anything's wrong.
Right.
But if he does ask you, then you'll be ready to report that.
And something else was just brought up that's important for everybody to hear at least once. Sayadaw doesn't want to hear the same experience that you reported the day or so before. Virtually, you're telling him you've seen nothing new in 48, 50 some odd hours, however it is long, and that we get to see him. Virtually, you're saying you were doing nothing in between, because if a yogi is really trying to pay attention, they are bound to see different phenomena than they saw 2 days ago when they reported last. So just to keep that in mind, he knows what you've experienced once you tell him that report. He knows you're capable of that. He knows you're going to be possibly seeing those elements or aspects throughout the whole retreat. Now he wants to know what else you've seen the next time you come. That's not easy, but you need to know that. For instance, one older yogi, one that's been practicing quite a while, came to him last retreat and told him about clear-cut phenomena that and he said he was very excited, he said wonderful, or whatever he said, very good, he told her, very clear. 2 days later she came and she reported similar aspects of what she reported the day before. He went, and he didn't say anything else. And so, as a result, she didn't understand that. And so when I found out about it, I was able to explain, but it was much, much later. Just so I'm telling you now so you can avoid that problem. He is really listening to what else you've seen in 2 days. He knows if you haven't seen anything else, you haven't been paying attention. It's not possible to come in there 2 days later and not to have seen other aspects of your experience. So just so you realize that. Any other questions?
Does he refer to his notes?
How does he remember?
What you reported to you was
Extraordinary memory. Extraordinary memory.
not referring to you.
Nope, doesn't have to.
He does sometimes take notes, though. And he knows you through your reports. That's kind of, some people know people through personalities. He knows people through their reports, really. So that's kind of how he comes to know you.
So do you read the report that you've written each time?
Yes. You read it.
That's the simplest.
Yes,
There are
right.
about 10 minutes for each person for their interview. So, and again, we've stressed this particularly, just move this out of the way, particularly when working with the translator. If you start speaking the way we talk to our friends, the translator will be forced to guess, to extract the meaning from that. And sometimes he can be very accurate, and sometimes when there's a guesswork involved, he can guess the wrong thing. And that gets translated wrong, and then Sayadaw gets the wrong understanding of what's going on. So the best way to work with a translator and to work with the Sayadaws, because Sayadaw does speak some English. So if you speak very slowly and clearly, and in very simple language, Sayadaw, these are the words, this is his vocabulary. Yogi's reporting, that's his best vocabulary. So if you say your report in a very slow, clear way, almost like I'm speaking now, then the translator can translate it very clearly, and Sayadaw can even hear it while you're saying it. So the translator translation will just be a confirmation to Sayadaw of what he has heard. So the best way to do that is to write up a very, to have basically a report written out, and not even in sentences. It can just be, rising and the sensations you experienced during the rising, and you can basically just read, there was rising, I noted, and just list the 4 different characteristics. Those simple noting labels that you're using in your mind is actually what Sayadaw wants to hear. You won't bore him if you just sit there listing, I noted, stiffness and then tension and then pressure, and then I began, the mind wandered, I noted wandering. If you just do it very systematically and state what the object was that you were observing and what label you gave it, that's the best type of report for Sayadaw. And we've given you the examples in those booklets we handed out to you. So if you are confused or unsure, you can refer to those and look at those. Those are meant to help you and to guide you.
And another mention before I forget, and someone that mentioned the walking meditation, don't mention, and I know Andrew and Bill wrote this already in the form, but just to make it clearer, please don't mention your walking meditation first, even if it's the better one than you're sitting. Mention the sit. He wants to hear the rising and falling first. Then you can mention the walking meditation. All right, you can even say after that, so I have a good walking meditation or a worthwhile, whatever way you want to put it. But don't mention it first, even though you yourself might think it's the more worthwhile of the two to mention.
Just to clarify that too,
yeah.
The rising and falling is like the litmus test for Sayadaw. When you report that, he knows it says a lot to him. The way you describe the rising and falling from one day to the next can change, can become clearer, or if it stays the same, Sayadaw knows your practice is about the same. So the more detail, the more clarity, and the more care you can bring to describing the rising and falling will give Sayadaw the clearest picture. And that's why we start with it, and it is expected and that's the order. Sayadaw will be surprised and not understand why somebody would go out of the order. It's just when you go in there, you report on the rising and falling, then you, in the way that we've described in the book, describe the other objects as they happen. But it's a simple form to learn and to follow that way. And then Sayadaw doesn't get confused, or the yogi doesn't get confused.
He gives a specific amount of time to each yogi and then gongs you out? Is that it?
Yes.
Yes, some people actually get, if he's heard what he's heard, there's no need. The details, Sayadaw knows the practice extraordinarily well. Many people have gone through this course. It really is a coursework in meditation. And many people have taken this course. And so he knows where the yogi is in their coursework, what section of the textbook they're in, and what's to be coming next, and what problems they have. And so when yogis are learning new things, because we're learning, we're finding it very interesting. And we want to sometimes spend more time on a particular area that interests us instead of continuing the development of the practice. And so Sayadaw, when he hears where you are and he understands what about your practice, what he needs to know, he will then encourage you to continue practicing and not to get attached to or stick to certain areas which you may enjoy. And so that's why sometimes when the yogi thinks like this is important, and Sayadaw doesn't think it's that important because he knows more about it, or sometimes we don't think something's important, and Sayadaw will start asking us a lot of questions about it. So it's important to have a trusting relationship with Sayadaw. He knows what he's doing, and unless there's a translation problem.
A few more notes. Those of us who have a lot of worry or fear developed in our consciousness, in coming into an interview, we think, well, we're supposed to hurry up because the time's going to be over and over again. We might see notes saying, be short and succinct in your interview and just get to the point. It will seem like we're supposed to hurry up because there's a yogi behind us. Don't believe that whatsoever. That's the time, just like every other activity, that you move really carefully. Of course, you don't do lifting, moving, and placing, but left, right, you can do it very slowly. Left, right, left, right, left, right. And then you go to sit down. You don't hurry up and sit down, so you can hurry up and open your book. You move. Actually, let me go back there because there's a point. If another yogi is bowing, then go in and start your process. So you don't have to wait for another yogi to completely leave the interview room and then start. No problem. A yogi's bowing, then you can move very slowly in, moving aside from them, and then move very slowly and carefully. Get down, put your book down. Don't worry about putting your book down fast because you have to hurry up and bow. Put it down. Do your bow really carefully. Then very carefully reach for your book, even if Sayadaw says yes, very carefully. He's watching all your movements to see if you really can be mindful in the face of worry, fear, and all the rest of the stuff. So please help yourselves by doing that.
Can I also say something? I think it's very good, but also you must know that you're in a situation
Sure.
that other people are around
Sure,
you.
sure.
And Sayadaw feels that 10 minutes is long enough, plenty of time, and he feels it's really, you must be considerate of other yogis.
Sure.
So
Sure.
you should move slowly and carefully, but really be considerate. Don't move so slowly. You take up interview time by just moving to your seat. Really, it would be better to walk in during. It would be better.
Oh, absolutely.
You're clear that the interview's over.
Right,
even if
absolutely.
The other yogi hasn't started.
Absolutely, yeah, right, right. Yeah, don't worry actually about insulting or making the other yogi upset. Let's all agree now, nobody gets upset about another yogi who's come into our territory when we're starting, when we're finished. It's over, it's finished. Now just carefully leave. Yes, please.
Who speaks first? You wait until he speaks?
No, once you've finished your bow, you can lift your notebook, and then you can start to report. Sayadaw is waiting for you. He might say something like yes before you've even finished, before reaching. It doesn't matter. In either case, you don't have to wait for Sayadaw to speak.
Do you keep your eyes down?
You can look him in the eye if you want, but he won't look you in the eye. Only when he feels that's sufficient will he look you in the eye. So he's very clear about his relationship with you in that moment. He's not trying to give you something that's not real. He only wants to give you practical, real help, essential help. So if you want to look him in the eye, you can, but he probably won't look you in the eye back.
It wouldn't be rude not to make eye
Right.
contact. with him. Your top responsibility is to continue noting and be mindful. So whatever is most supporting of that for you, feel free to do.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure last retreat I did with Sayadaw, I was explaining what I was doing. I went left, right, and he said, who taught you left, right? And I said, it's lifting, placing, lifting, moving, and placing. So, because you mentioned left, right.
Right.
I didn't think that he wanted
Well, let me clear that up for you. Number one, you don't have to mention it in an interview because it's not worthwhile to mention. It's given for yogis who have stomach problems, and they're always given that meditation practice. And then they would just report on the second two parts, but they would always do it. I am saying from my own, from watching for years others, if a yogi particularly doesn't like walking meditation, I found it an incredible antidote. But right, don't report on left, right. There's no reason to. Okay.
To clarify, you do
Yeah.
15 minutes of a left, right, and
Yes.
then the slow, and then another 15
And-
of the left, right.
No. Oh, I'm glad you asked. No. Left, right, the fast. Then the next one is lifting, placing.
Mhm.
And then the next one is lifting, moving, placing. The real slow one.
Oh, I see.
So you go
it's a
all...
graduation.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
about what you just said, Joanna, there's nothing wrong with Sayadaw telling you that what you were doing, he doesn't need. We're not going to be perfect when we go in. The whole idea of going and reporting to Sayadaw is that he can point out to us where we can improve. So if he does give you a comment, or if he says you should do it this way, try not to take offense at that. It's really just a helpful reminder to point you in the right direction. So it's actually a good thing sometimes when he gives that type of reminder. Sarah, did you have a question?
So you walk in the room, you do your bows, but you go down on your knees. Then you stand up and sit in the chair.
No.
And then you stay on your knees.
You stay on your knees. Yeah. Yeah. Wait, excuse me. Do you know that you bow when you first come in, and then after he's given you, when you leave? Yeah, 2 times.
About 3 times each time?
Yes, always 3 times, because you're not bowing to Sayadaw as such. You're really bowing to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Sayadaw happens to be part of the Sangha, but not him as a man, no. Yes, Lisa? When do interviews begin?
3 days?
In a few
Yeah,
days,
a few days.
and we'll let you know.
Yes, please.
And what if you can't get out of your knees
You can't.
Talk to sister. She'll help arrange that.
Chair, someplace so that you can bow from the waist.
I'd like to show everybody the difference between what Sayadaw has come to call American mindfulness, as taught in America, and real Satipatthana. And it's actually very easy to see. I've come up with a very easy way to show it, and so I will display that now. Oh my God. Yes. I was going to show the wrong one first. So should I put it on, keep it on? Can I stand up with it? Oh.
I don't think it'll reach unless you come this way.
Okay. If I move closer? Yeah, okay. What I'm going to do next is what's called American mindfulness. All right? We hear the bell, the sitting's finished, and now we want to go and do walking meditation. So, all right? So, we open our eyes. Maybe we're noting moving. that's getting up and noting moving. That's called American mindfulness, right? It will result in a lot of boredom and a lot of restlessness with this practice when we move like that. This is Satipatthana. Next. The bell rings. Note hearing, hearing, if you can. Okay. If you can, note opening of the eyes. You feel the intention arise to get up and start walking. And of course, I'm going to say them out loud, but we mean them in our mind. Moving. Moving. Turning. Moving. Touching. Moving. Moving. Pushing. Moving. Pushing. Moving. Moving. Standing. If that kind of care is done enough times, I promise you, boredom and restlessness will disappear. That's Satipatthana as opposed to American mindfulness. Yeah, okay.
There's business I want to go through. And just one last opportunity, if there are any questions at this point that people have that we can answer that would be helpful. We know that we've given you a lot of information. We hope it's helpful. We don't want it to be overwhelming or mesmerizing or confusing. So take what you can that's useful at this point, apply it. There are the teachers here to guide you and to help you. And if there are a couple last questions, I'd be happy to help with them.
You mentioned about the walking meditation instruction.
No, not yet. You can mention that.
One of the questions that come up for yogis, and it will happen, is at a Dhamma talk. When Sayadaw is talking in Burmese, we should not be sitting there waiting for him to finish. It will only develop boredom and restlessness, and one will really harm their practice. So as long as Sayadaw is talking Burmese and you don't understand Burmese, if you understand it, it's a different story, note hearing, hearing, hearing. If you have your eyes open, note seeing. Note, 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 note. There's a buttocks sitting against the floor or against a chair. Note, hardness, 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 touching, touching, touching. Right? There's a whole lot of time that Burmese is going on. One should be noting and noting and knowing. Then, when U Miat Thang starts translating, definitely stop noting. That's the time to listen. That's the only time to stop noting, is when U Miat Thang is translating and you're hearing the Dhamma talk. I can promise you, if you do it in that manner and you really note during that Dhamma talk when Sayadaw's talking Burmese, you'll hear things that's been translated that you couldn't possibly hear if you sit there waiting for him to finish. Yes?
You do the same thing during the interview when he's talking in Burmese?
Sure. Yes.
So just let me say about walking.
Wait, there's a question, sister. Yes.
During the interview, is it all right to take note, to write down the information that is given to you?
Yes. I think it's best, though, to leave the room and then to make notes of what Sayadaw said to you. So it facilitates the process. Also, just one logistical thing. This retreat, if you haven't practiced with Sayadaw before, it's slightly different from some of the Western teacher-led retreats. And one of the main differences is that in the early days, in some of the Western retreats, they provide a lot of ongoing guidance and talk. And here we're kind of jumping into the practice more quickly. There's just like we enter silence, and then we begin the schedule of sitting and walking. And just know that it's okay the first few days, and Sayadaw knows this, you're going to gradually work up to the full schedule. Obviously you can't just jump in and be at full steam. So be kind to yourself, allow yourself if a little leeway in the first few days so that it's not a painful experience, but it's a gradual transition into this more rigorous daily schedule. Tonight, if people would like, this afternoon, we can schedule one of the Sayadaw Asobachara, the assistant monk, to come and give walking meditation
At 1 o'clock.
at 1 o'clock. Would people be interested in that, or would people like to, you would be interested? Terrific. So then at 1 o'clock, maybe up here to meet, and then maybe you could go to one of the walking rooms and he'll give you the basic instructions on how to do walking meditation.
And I just want to say one other thing also, which is that if people have